Now we're going to kick off the conversation. And for those of you that saw the marketing activities that I kept on sending out for the past 2 weeks, we said we're going to be focusing on, what are some of the common mistakes that entrepreneurs, early stage founders make when they start their businesses, but also what are investors looking for? So Seven is our guest today. He's going to be answering those questions and telling us a bit more about, things along those lines, but also things like mental health, because, the entrepreneurial process, especially for a solo founder, can be very stressful. So how do you manage yourself? How do you manage the anxieties that comes with running a business? There can be quite a lot of anxieties. So how do you manage it? So rather than me sort of introducing Seven, I'll give the floor to Seven to introduce himself. He's a VC with Colorintech, but I'll give him the floor to sort of give us more about himself. So Seven, over to you. Do you want to tell us what you do?
Yeah, sure. Well, hi, everyone. It's great to see you all. In fact, let me switch my Zoom view so that I can see everyone's faces. Fantastic. Hi, everyone. My name is Seven. It is just like the number. I basically, at this point, to give you a very brief background about myself, have pretty much dedicated my life to figuring out how to help founders increase their chances of success as much as possible. And there are some core reasons for this, which maybe we'll get into during the talk. But in terms of a little bit about my background and what I do now, started my first business, co-ran my first business when I was 18, where we worked with eventually some pretty big name clients to help them understand their young target audiences better. We ran target market research for them, programs for them, which is kind of where my technical background comes from. Not technical in a techie sense, but technical in that's what I do. I run programs and create systems to help people succeed and help us learn things. And so now, across several years since then, we're bounced around startups and other organizations in a few industries, including fashion and music, as well as some non-for-profit things such as supporting the homeless. And now I've landed in a place where my whole life is about helping founders succeed. And I do this in two ways. One of them, which Winifred alluded to, was my role at a non-for-profit that works throughout Europe, but we're based here in London, called Colorintech. And my role there is the startup and VC lead. So not a VC or anything like that. I don't handle much money myself, although I have been giving out a little bit of grant funding recently. I lead our pathway where I run programs, which requires me to know and speak to VCs as well as know how to help founders succeed and run those programs for them. I also have a startup of my own where we're in the very, very early stages, but it's called StartrHub, where we're also looking to develop a solution to help founders figure out what to do next to increase those chances of success. So my whole life is about that, really. What are your chances of success and how do we increase them? And so hopefully tonight we can talk a bit about some of the things that will impact that.
Okay, great. Thanks a lot for that wonderful introduction, Seven. I know you already, but I'm sure it's always nice to hear the reflection for all those as well on the call who are meeting you for the first time. Now we go into the conversation and we want to go back to the childhood, because really, in a sense, when I think about a lot of the entrepreneurs I've met, I have listened to via podcast or the Fireside chats, one thing I tend to see a lot is childhood, the upbringing. There's something there that sort of makes them choose the entrepreneurial part rather than the conventional popular path of getting a regular job. So, Seven, do you want to tell us a bit about your childhood? What was it like? Are there any particular role models that led you to the path of entrepreneurship, or was it just a self-discovery?
Yeah, this is a great question, Winifred, and I love that you start here because back when I ran a podcast, which was a podcast about leaders' mental health, this was always the question I started with. And my favorite podcasts all do the same. You're very right in that our early years will always affect what we do as we go into adulthood. So what was mine? I won't give you the full breakdown because it can drop the mood a little bit. But the short version is I did have a fairly difficult upbringing. I do live in London in the UK, but as most of you can probably tell, I don't have an English accent. I was born in Los Angeles, California. Um, and in my early years, I experienced a number of difficulties from losing my mother at a young age to experiencing homelessness and rough sleeping. And what I got this sense of from from the world was that my life wasn't really worth anything. With the constant difficulty, the constant stress, and the what I'm only now going through the kind of health systems to determine if there's even potentially some trauma there. I kept getting the sense that I was not good enough. I kept getting this sense that the world was a horrible place and it didn't care about us, or at the very least, it didn't care about me, and I didn't know why. This led when I had moved to the UK to be with family here around the age of 12 or so. Through those early teenage years, led to a lot of difficulty, a lot of social anxiety, and other kind of unprocessed difficulties. So throughout my whole teenage life, I was very, how should I say, cynical, right? Cynical, defeated, and dealt with a lot of that kind of emotional difficulty and stress and the impact of that youth. Now, a lot of the people I surround myself with now, a lot of fellow founders or people, friends or other people in my network, they are people that had this drive from a young age to do something. And I, quite frankly, did not have that. What I had was a very deep rooted sense that something was wrong, but I didn't feel like I could do anything about it. Now, fast forward to the age of 18, after, the first 18 years of my life with these feelings and this perspective. And you get to a crossroads around that age where you need to decide what you're going to do with your life. And so I knew two things. I didn't know much about what I wanted to do, but I knew two main things that I desperately wanted to improve my life so that I and, any future family I had or anything like that didn't need to go through those same issues. But secondly, that I desperately wanted to make the world a better place. Because why should anyone be experiencing the kinds of things that I had to, especially the things that were avoidable if things had been better in society? And so I had this really interesting opportunity to live in Nepal for 3 months. Very spiritual country, developing country, which means it's a very different lifestyle. And I lived in a mountaintop village in Nepal with a host family volunteering there. And I took a book with me that was written by, was co-authored by Holly Branson, Richard Branson's daughter, who was someone who founded a charity I had been doing some work with at the time. So I got given this book, didn't expect much from it. Went to this place. The reason I paint you the picture of where I was is because in that situation, I was very broken down, right? Totally uncomfortable. And when you're in that situation, your mind opens up to new possibilities. So I brought this book with me, not knowing what to expect of it, being very broken down and open to new possibilities. And this book talked about the future of the economy, of the sharing economy, of what it called the we economy. And in explaining this, it outlined this concept of social entrepreneurship. Social entrepreneurship told me when I believed that there was no way of improving my life and the world at the same time, I thought I had to do one or the other. Get a high-paying corporate job I hated, or do something that made the world a better place, but it might not pay very well, or something like that. This taught me that you could change the world and change your own life at the exact same time. This thing I thought was impossible, it said, here, it's possible. And my mind, it just blew my mind completely. So as soon as I returned home, I threw myself into a first business with a friend of mine, and there started a journey of all these years since, where my whole life has been about learning what helps founders succeed, learning how important innovation is to make society a better place, learning about how crucial a role founders and people like all of us in here how crucial of a position all of us are in and how important we all are for the development of the world. And so everything I do now is based on that precedence. How can I help founders succeed so that they can make the world a better place? The book is called We Economy, W-E Economy. So It's like put a W in front of the word economy. I really, really enjoyed it. It's very, very easy to understand, but talked to me about some very interesting concepts. So definitely worth it read. And that's probably where I'll leave that if that answers your question for now, Winifred.
It sure does. Thanks a lot for that one. It's We Economy by Holly Branson, Seven said. So for those that would want to check out the book. And also remember that this is a fireside chat, it's not a podcast. So if you have questions, just feel free to pop them in the chat as we go. Now, I think I'll just sort of add on to that question. Why Nepal? When you said Nepal, why Nepal? Why?
Yeah, that's a slightly less interesting answer, unfortunately.
Okay.
It was a program that was run at the time by the UK government, or was sponsored by the UK government. And, there were about 13 countries, 12 or 13 countries you could get placed in. And I just so happened to be placed in Nepal. But to be fair, it's the one I wanted to go to for the reasons I mentioned earlier. So I guess I just got lucky.
Good. I can imagine. I can imagine. They've been very beautiful, the mountains and stuff like that. But okay, let's move on to the next question. Now, your experience, so since you started businesses, or since you started your first business at the age of 18, you've been trying to understand what makes business or startups fail. And that's really because when you look at the statistics, my research is in entrepreneurial finance. And so because of that, I need to really go into the startup world to really understand what's happening there. And through my research, I found that if you look at the statistics, not up to 50% of businesses that start today will get to the 50th year of their existence. So my question is, based on your research and your experience so far, what if we try to break them down into three? What are the top three reasons that entrepreneurs fail or startups fail?
Wow. Well, you're really testing my knowledge by asking for three, my memory as well. Here's what I can tell you for a fact is the number one reason tends to be that people don't know if, founders don't always know if people actually want what they're creating. I read somewhat recently that this was a study done a couple years ago here in the UK that something like 18% of founders actually do market research before they have an idea. So in other words, what usually happens is an idea pops into your head and you go, oh, this would be cool. And some founders, but actually not even that many of them, I think, I actually don't remember the exact stat now, but not too many of them will then go and really rigorously test if this is something that people will buy. So in other words, there's this process I tend to describe for the newest founders I speak to, of ideally before you even have a concrete idea, you do some initial market research and ask people some questions about an area you're interested in. Then you'll go and start to formulate an idea of some kind based on the things that you might have learned, things that you're interested in, and a number of other things. And then you might go and start to validate that idea by building a little bit of a prototype. Once you have something that comes back to you from there saying that there is a good enough market for this, people do want this, and this prototype is getting a pretty good reaction, then you can start to commit to it. A lot of founders are very emotionally committed to an idea that has no backing. So what can start to happen is, I think you've only got so what I do remember specifically is about 40-ish or over 40% of founders will say, or have said in one particular study, I remember anyway, that the number one reason that they failed is because there wasn't a need for their product. Now, if you had tested a viable prototype, if more founders had tested a viable prototype and what they got coming back to them was, yes, I do want this, or no, I don't want this, or some of this is nice, but I don't think I'd use this, then they'd have the data that they need to know if it's worth pursuing, if they need to pivot, or if it isn't worth pursuing. And so that is the number one thing really that I notice is, if we have this process of constantly asking questions, constantly testing, constantly figuring out, is this something people really, really want, before getting too emotionally attached to the idea itself, then you start to create some real magic. Um, and I've actually been doing some interviews with some of our founders recently that back this up. A lot of the ones that took much longer, that needed to pivot, that had teams of people that they needed to let go because they were burning money and not getting anywhere. All of these founders basically came back to me and said, the reason we're here now and we weren't more successful a year or two ago is because we just didn't have something our customers wanted. We needed to pivot 3 times. I've seen that before. You need to pivot over and over and over again, but not pivot in a good way, pivot in a, oh, this wasn't working, so let's figure out if we have to pivot. And at that point, it's a little bit too late. Well, for some founders, it can be too late. And that kind of brings me on is if I had to say there's an answer 2 or 3 to add to that as a big number 1, if what happens to a lot of founders that I have seen and I've read about is if you're in that position where you're pivoting last minute because something isn't working and you've run out of cash, or whatever else it is, that's the reason you fail. What if that last bit of risk, or what if continuing after that is too risky for you? What if you just have no way of making that cash back, or it's going to take you a year of savings to get back to what you need to get to? What if you need to start from scratch and that's going to take you time? And what if it impacts your mental health and so you're burned out? There's all these reasons that if you don't put the right foundations in place first, tend to lead to failure. And that's what there's a number of reasons, top 1, 2, 3, up to 5, even 10 reasons, but so many of them stem from that foundation that you may or may not have built. And so I'm always working with founders in the early stage. What is your foundation? What have you built? How much have you tested? And how much do you ask questions? Because you're not going to know if you don't ask. And this is the thing, we all live in our own little bubbles, right? We all have our own paradigm through which life is filtered through. And other people will have naturally different paradigms, even if they're only a little bit different. That can impact a lot more than we think. And so you're only going to know the answer by asking questions. So that's not quite the question that you asked me, but that would be my biggest piece of advice, to look at those top 3 or even more reasons why. Ask questions, because so many of those top reasons come from not asking enough.
Okay, thanks. Thanks a lot for that one, Seven. So validating the idea. I know this is something that Simon is very keen about, idea validation. And that's why even the Startup Hackathon that Founders and Mentors is putting together September this year is really solidly around idea validation. Because, I don't think I would add anything more to what you said, Seven. It's really, the problem is really the foundation. Once you get that wrong, you're really going to spend a lot of time and energy just chasing shadows and realize that the foundation was wrong and then come back and sort of get it right. So thank you very much for that one. Now, I think the next question I would have asked was the common mistakes that you're seeing entrepreneurs make. Well, I don't think it's too different from what you said. Well, is there anything you want to add on to there when based on your discussions or your chats with founders, what are you seeing them? Are there any common mistakes other than what you've said that you see them make?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose there are a few. Some of them are double-edged swords. So in other words, they might be good, they might be bad, depending. So I think the number 1 thing is on the flip side, or I guess to inform what I was just describing, is making assumptions. The reason you want to ask questions is because you've made too many assumptions. I won't drill into that too much because I've just spent ages talking about it, probably a little bit too long, but that's probably number 1. But there are some other things within that. One of them, which is the double-edged sword, is some founders are very, very emotionally attached to their idea, and it makes sense and it can be a good thing. So what I mean is, even if after lots of testing, people say, no, I don't quite like this idea, some founders will try their best to continue with it anyway. I've seen this a couple of times. I sort of made a mistake of doing this myself earlier on in my career as well. So I know it's out there, because if you know your idea is really interesting, if you know the team is really great, if you know your initial product is really, really interesting, you don't want to just let it go, even if something isn't right or isn't working. One of my earliest startups that I was involved in, I eventually had to leave the team because the team structure broke down. this was after a point of several months of me thinking, is this really working? Is this really right? Is this a great use of our time? And because we had built some stuff and because our team was really skilled and because we knew the market was there, I didn't want to let it go. But eventually, things within the team just broke down further and further, and I had to leave. So, in other words, the world kind of pushed me out of it because it wasn't working, but I didn't want to admit it wasn't working. Now, the reason I say this is a double-edged sword is because entrepreneurship can be so taxing on you and so difficult in a number of ways, which we might touch on more later in the conversation. So you need to have a real passion, energy, and drive for what you do. You must believe in what you do completely. So a lot of founders will so completely believe in what they're doing that they won't want to look kind of reality in the face, which might mean pivoting or leaving an idea behind entirely. Um, and it's a difficult pill to swallow, and it's not ever my place to tell someone to stop doing something or that it's not worth their time. So I work with lots of founders and I speak to them all the time. I'll never say to them, it doesn't sound like this is the right thing to do. But what I will always encourage is to ask those questions and be really, really honest about what the results are. For those who are building more techie startups that might be looking for investment from, say, venture capitalists, one of the things venture capitalists have told me multiple times is there's a number of things they'll look for in the founders they invest in, but one of them is self-awareness, which is one of the big ones for them. And it's also one of the ones that doesn't surprise me, but at the same time, I didn't actually expect him to come out and say to me. I don't know if that makes any sense. But I was like, this is really interesting that this is one of the first answers they keep giving me, because essentially what it boils down to, and the reason why they care so much about self-awareness is because you need to know when you need to pivot. You need to know when you don't have a skill and need to bring in a team member. And it's okay to not have those skills. It's okay for something to not be right. But if you have the self-awareness to go, I'm not quite good enough at this thing, or I don't really have this exact thing in place, or whatever it is, then they know you have the mindset to lead, because ultimately you're going to encounter a million and one challenges as an entrepreneur. One of my favorite sayings is that an entrepreneur is just another word for a leader. Entrepreneur equals leader. So that is a core leadership skill that they're on the lookout for, because they know you'll be able to navigate that difficulty if you have that skill, or that you'll be more likely to navigate that difficulty if you have that skill. So building that self-awareness is something I think a lot of founders don't take enough of a look at. And that can lead to a number of challenges, including making those assumptions and sticking to their guns, even if they're just assumptions. I hope that helps answer your question.
Yeah, it does. So Gyang from the audience has asked the question that, do you have any tips on how to look at your idea objectively and not have tunnel vision?
Wow. Yeah, this is a really, really big question, because it's it goes beyond the idea. That this is something I say to founders a lot is, in the early stages, you are the business. So say you're stressed out, you're having a breakdown of some kind, you don't have the skill to do something. The business is stressed out. The business is breaking down. The business isn't able to work in a certain way because you are the business. So if you're tunnel visioned on your idea, how much of that is the idea and how much of that is a skill within yourself that you need to develop? And that's the kind of question I would put back to anyone in that position. I know I've been in that position. When I've been in that position, I've needed to kind of step back and really honestly ask myself, is this working? And if not, why? So in other words, if we think tunnel vision is you're in a tunnel and this is your vision, by taking a step back, you get to zoom out and look at the whole picture. The answer to this question is essentially, but this is so much easier said than done, is essentially to be able to emotionally disconnect, even if it's for a short period of time, take a step back and go, is it okay if this doesn't work out? This is something I spoke to founders a lot about actually back when I was recording my podcast, which, like I said, is all about leaders' mental health. My guests would often talk to me about being able to be okay with issues and any failure that might arise. So I spoke to a number of founders who would only be doing what they were doing, or sorry, I should say, they had a number of mental health challenges that came from not being able to disconnect from a deep-rooted subconscious reason they were doing their business. So this sounds like a roundabout way of answering the question, but I'll get there, I promise. I think this is an important thing to establish. And this is what actually was one of the reasons why I really like that you start this off by asking about childhood, Winifred. A lot of people will have a reason why they're tunnel visioned, which is something very deeply emotionally rooted within them. So, for example, this is a really funny stat. I don't know why this is the case, but there's a really funny stat that actually a lot of male social entrepreneurs have problems or some kind of negative emotional association with their fathers, which is a really, really interesting psychological statistic to be aware of. A lot of founders will be doing what they're doing or pushing so hard because they're trying to prove something. Am I trying to prove to myself that I'm good enough because something in my life when I was growing up told me I wasn't good enough? This is a very common theme for founders, someone trying to validate themselves. I spoke to a lot of founders about that on my podcast. When you're tunnel visioned, you're probably what I have experienced within myself as well as within a lot of other people is you will be emotionally attached to your own success, which you have placed into the idea. So what I'm trying to describe is that there's almost this pathway within your head that the idea itself is the business. The idea itself is super, super, super important, and it's what's gonna make you amazing, because this is what we look at all of the biggest like rock star entrepreneurs. Okay, Jeff Bezos is a big deal because Amazon was an amazing idea or whatever, right? You are emotionally attached to the business succeeding, and the business succeeding is your idea and how great it is. So it makes it impossible to step out of that tunnel when you are attached to that line of thinking. I know that was a roundabout way of getting to that conclusion, but that would be my conclusion is if you are attached to that process, that A to Z mental process, stepping back is going to be almost impossible. If, on the other hand, you are able to say, it's okay if this doesn't work. I am just as valuable and I am just as successful, whether this succeeds right this second or not. It is okay if this doesn't work out. The whole world won't end. Life will continue. And other positive reinforcing thoughts like that. It makes it easier to go, okay, now that I've had those thoughts and I've established that as the groundwork, let me take a step back and really objectively analyze, is my idea worth pursuing based on all the questions I've been asking and the feedback that I've been getting? The reason I say that's easier said than done is because like that is a huge emotional journey for a lot of people. It requires a lot of transformation sometimes. I know it did for me. And for a lot of founders that I've spoken to who are aware of the fact that this was the case for them. But tunnel vision is ultimately tends to be an emotional reaction or an emotional connection. So to get out of it, you would have to be able to step back from that.
All right, great. Thank you very much, Seven, for that answer. Very, very good answer there. Because when I think about it, I know this saying in Silicon Valley that for you to be a successful entrepreneur, I think it goes by you have to have failed 7 times. So it's 7 times. So I think it's quite important that founders get comfortable with failing, because failing is not necessarily a bad thing. People, if you don't fail, how do you learn? So it's okay, if
Exactly.
you
Yeah.
fail, there's nothing wrong. And I think by having that mindset, you sort of release yourself of this burden to want to prove yourself, to want to really sort of make a point across. So thank you very much for that answer. I think we'll now, for time, we'll move on to the mental health side of things, and we'll finish up with the investor side. Now, we know that, being a solo founder, especially, or even if you have a co-founder, starting a business can be quite challenging. And we think about mental health is such a big deal now in the world. And we're saying, if you don't know how to manage yourself properly during the business process, it can affect other parts of your life. So I think we'll just sort of break it down to the top 3 points of how do you manage your mental health when running a business. So just keep it at 3 points and say, what are your top 3?
Sure. Number 1 is to have people around you that you can fully open up to and let in. The reason I say that is because the loneliness when you're not, even if you're not a solo founder, even if you've got a co-founder, the loneliness can be very, very, very real. And that can have other difficult knock-on effects. Having people, whether it's friends, a partner, or that co-founder, who you're able to really let in and talk to about not just any difficulties you're having, but just how it's making you feel, however much they can support you, can make it feel less lonely. So that's my number 1 tip. If I had to include a 2 and 3, number 2 would be, and some people I've spoken to are not a huge fan of the way I'm going to put this, but I'm a big fan of the idea of balance. So my number 2 would be understand your balance. And I say that your balance for a very specific reason. That balance looks different for everyone else. I think the people I've spoken to that aren't a big fan of that have said that because what does balance mean? And even as an entrepreneur, you have to be working crazy hours. You have to throw yourself out there. You have to do all these crazy, difficult things. So what does balance really mean? But actually, your balance means understanding yourself. Actually, funny enough, comes back to that self-awareness we mentioned earlier. Having the self-awareness to know where your line is will keep you from potentially crossing into the places of burnout, extra stress, and all the difficulties that causes. And like I said, if you're burned out, the business is burned out. If you are breaking down, the business is breaking down. So it isn't just about your own mental health. In a way, it's also about the health of your business. So that would be my number 2. Choosing a number 3 is going to be a little bit difficult. A number, I think, of the founders that I have spoken to have varying degrees mental health related challenges or challenges that impact their mental health, I should say, that stem from certain things they may need to or not need to do. So what I mean by that is sometimes I'll work with founders who are really not comfortable pitching. So I think this is the best way I can describe this last example. Say you need to pitch in front of an audience, investors, whoever. It could be, just an audience like this one of 40 or so people on Zoom. A lot of founders, a lot of people in general, actually nothing to do with founders, a lot of people in general will go, this is really nervous. This makes me really nervous. I'm really, really anxious, which is understandable. But as a leader, there's a specific mindset I would encourage you to have to overcome something like this. So in other words, helps you or might help you overcome some anxiety or other self-limiting beliefs. Ask the question, why are you here? Because if I'm pitching my business to you or any solution of any kind to you, why am I here? If my mindset is, what if I look stupid? What if they don't like me? What if they don't like my idea? Whatever it is. All of that is about you. But if you ask, why am I here? You start to break down a pathway that is beyond just yourself. Why am I here? Because I need to raise investment so that my business can succeed. Why do you need to do that? And keep asking yourself why, right? Why do you need to do that? Well, because that investment will help me grow the business. Why do you need to do that? And eventually you'll get to the end result, which is so that we can help as many people as possible who need our solution. Whether you're a for-profit business, a social enterprise, a charity, it doesn't matter. You're there to change someone's life for the better. It could be a solution so that they save time, selling cars. It doesn't matter. You're there to make someone's life better. So you start to, or the reason you're having the problem in the first place is because it's about you. What if I look stupid? What about me, me, me? Actually, it's not about you. It's about the people you're there to help, the people whose lives you're there to change. So by shifting your perspective about why you're here and whose life you're able to change and who you're able to help, that with enough practice, it's not, again, this is one of these things that's easier said than done, but with enough practice, the mental health related challenges that stem from your own beliefs or limiting self-beliefs in yourself can slowly start to fade away. And you're left feeling more empowered because you're there for something bigger than yourself. So that's my number 3. Shift your perspectives so that you really deeply understand that you're there for more than just yourself.
Great. Thank you very much, Seven. And I think those 3 points really, very good answers there. People around you, especially in this age of digitalization, we're all on Zoom, everything almost happens on Zoom. Like, think about our life today. Almost everything is online. We study online, we date online, we socialize online, we keep in touch online. So it's really, hard. And the thing is, we're not, humans are not designed to be online. We're social creatures. There's something about, interacting with people physically. So, I think that's a very good point. But balance as well, finding. But I think for myself, it did take me a bit of time to sort of find some balance. You have all these goals you want to achieve there, and sometimes they can weigh you down. So it's very important I think it takes a bit of observation to see, how much do I achieve every day? And then once you have an idea of that, you sort of walk around it, because sometimes you have all these people say you have to work, 18 hours a day. You have to sometimes, but not all the time. And it's not very advisable to do that. So great. Thanks for that one. I see there's a question here. So several questions. First one from Taranum is saying that they have had a challenge where they've started a business and sort of gave a very, trying to give the lowest price to the customer. And over time, they found out that from the supplier side of things, the cost of the goods have gone up. So in a sense, it's like the price they are selling at, they are making a loss on that price at the moment. Do you have any advice on that one, Seven?
Yeah, this is a really interesting this is a really interesting business case where I've stopped caring too much about price, which might sound really naive to some people, but let me explain. The traditional measures of whether something is or the value of something is money or time, maybe another more specific resource depending on your situation or whatever it is, industry or whatever it is. That key word for me is actually value. So what value are you providing? And value encompasses far more than money. It can include, what is the experience that you take someone through and the journey that they get to go on? What are they left with at the end of the day? How much does it change their lives? Reason I say all of this to answer this question is because my question back to something like that would be, or a question like that would be, why are you making something as cheap as possible? Are you providing enough value so that your price can be in the middle range as opposed to the lowest possible range within whatever your business is? or beyond the medium range, in the high end range. In other words, if sourcing is more expensive than your price, the short answer is obviously that you have a problem. But how to fix that is by looking at the overall value you provide. And the reason I say this is an interesting business case is because a lot of founders, especially those earlier stage founders, are more likely to underprice themselves. And I've seen this with lots of founders, but I've actually done this myself as well, where you might underprice something because in your head you go, would I spend that money on it myself? But then what people will naturally think in their head is, if the price is so low, what is the quality? And so what that leads to, the conclusion that that leads to is, I still am not going to buy it, even if it's the lowest possible price. It could possibly be and way cheaper than everyone else. And so founders will sometimes lower their prices, hoping that this increases their sales, especially in the early stages when they don't have many customers. Maybe they want to get out there in front of more customers. But actually, what a lot of founders will find is this essentially doesn't do anything for them. They still don't get the customers, and so there was no point in making it that cheap. Instead, taking a step back and going, I can increase my price by this much, all the way up to this much, sometimes way more than you would have expected to price for it. Because here is the value that it provides, and you understand that value. And then you're marketing on value, not on here's X item for the lowest possible price. And there are some businesses where it might initially seem harder to do, or not as clear how you provide that other value. So for example, if I'm selling, a glass for your water, it's a glass. How could I possibly make that more expensive? What if it's a super fancy glass? I don't know. What if it comes in a specialized container? What if, and here's where social entrepreneurship comes into it, what if with every single one that I buy, a certain amount of money gets donated to a charity, and then a QR code comes in the box that the glass gets delivered in, so that I can track where that money is going to. That sounds really complicated, but that might be cheaper to implement than you think. And if that means you can quadruple your prices, you've suddenly gone from a thin profit margin or no profit margin to a bigger profit margin while having more of an impact and a happier customer. Everybody wins. And so, the short answer to the question is, it might mean relooking at your business model and your financial model to understand the value you're providing, if you can improve that, if you need to, and then communicating that better so that you can actually increase your prices. Because making something as cheap as possible is rarely the way forward from what I've seen. I hope that makes sense.
Yes, it does. And that value concept ties back to the foundation. Getting the foundation right does really make a lot of difference. So thank you on that. So for sake of time, we'll quickly jump to the investor side of thing now. So Seven, you are the VC lead at Colorintech. And so you have the experience of, identifying startups, seeing whether, giving them money or deciding to give them money and that kind of thing. So do you want to tell us, when you see a group of entrepreneurs and you're, let's say it's a demo day and you're trying to pick an entrepreneur founder that you're going to invest in, just want to reduce this to the top three things that you look out for, the top three things you look out for as an investor in a founder or founding it.
Sure. Well, again, I think so. I think there's actually potentially distinction to make here. So I don't do any investing myself. What I do is I lead relationships with investors, which means needing to really deeply understand what you just talked about. So I can still talk to that. But when I'm doing things like demo days, what I'm doing is actually preparing founders to be in front of those investors during it, like at the end of our accelerator program or something like that. So I guess, and I can still, I think I can still answer that question looking at it from both of those sides. So from the preparation side, preparing founders, what I tend to always recommend is have a story that you can take people through. So a really basic pitch deck at something like a demo day is, here's our problem, here's our solution, here's the size of the market and how much money you might be able to make, maybe our product in more detail, give us some money. And if someone's only just seen you 5 seconds ago or 3 minutes ago or however long the pitch is, that's not going to work. You know what I mean? The thing is, investors are used to seeing that. So if you really stand out, it might. But what catches people's attention, all people in general, what catches attention is if you, because we're all human, you know, if you take someone on a journey with you, then suddenly perspectives open and doors start to open. So what do I mean by this? If I could take you on a journey, well, actually, no, let me give you the basic example first. If I said to you, people are not happy with where they buy their water glasses from. So, what we do is make it so that you can buy a glass online more easily and then track the impact that that glass is having, because 10 cents from every glass goes to, providing someone with water. But doing this is going to cost us 300,000, fund us. That's kind of boring. What if instead I turned it into a story? One day, when I picked up my water glass, I realized that there were a lot of people around the world who unfortunately don't have access to water. Something like 700 million people don't have access to clean water around the world. And this is really, really heartbreaking. So what if I could find a way to make people aware of this, support that cause, while also providing them with something of unique value to them here in the UK or wherever that you are. And then I stumbled on an interesting social enterprise idea where what we do is we create glasses out of sustainable materials that we can track, and every single one that we sell takes you or goes to support these causes, which you as the user get to go on the journey with this money that gets donated, because along with your glass comes a QR code where you can track who this is going to help and learn more about them and their story and how you're helping them. The value of doing this is huge because so many millennial and Gen Z consumers want to be able to give back to the world in this way, which means that the market is 500 billion. I don't know, whatever the number is. Obviously, that's a crazy number, but you get what I mean. And to make this work, we only need 300K to start this off. So obviously, I'm using a bit of a ridiculous example, and it's not a techie example at all, really. But by taking you on a journey, I get to say, what if you're in this position? What if things are difficult for you? Well, actually, it would be life-changing if you could do this instead. And this creates a great opportunity because it doesn't exist yet. So I'm taking you on a journey. And once I built you up on this journey, then you want to hit them home. So if I had to say 3 things, I know this is a long-winded way of giving you my point number 1, because I think a lot of things stem from that. But once you've built someone up on this journey, you then need to slam it home, right? It needs to become a home run. You do that by ideally already having strong quality traction. So traction is a word that gets tossed around a lot in the startup space. But what I'm learning from VCs more and more is that there is a difference between traction for traction's sake and good quality traction. So 1,000 really boring, bare bones expressions of interest where someone's put their name and email down saying, yeah, I'd probably buy this, but you don't know who they are and you've had no interaction with them. That is less valuable than 10, 20, 50, yeah, even 10 people saying, I've already tried this and used it, and I love it. I am in love with this business. I'm in love with this product. I want it. When is it ready? And then, so that is your traction, that really quality traction. If you can take them on a journey where you've given them a story and then you hit them away, you blow them away with really quality traction you've already gained, an understanding of the market that fits into, then you have something that is really, really striking. And then the final thing I would say essentially comes down to business model in a way. At the end of any pitch should be an ask that makes sense. So what I always say to my founders is, what's your ask? If you're raising 300K, why? What's it going to go to? I once saw a founder who was raising 80K, with an 8-month runway. So what a runway is, for just so we're all on the same page, is this is how long your business can continue with the money that you've made. And I kind of went an 8-month runway and you're only raising 80K, and someone else raised that they put almost none of that into marketing. And it just didn't make sense. If we actually apply a similar thought to what we did a minute ago around making sure you're providing great value and potentially increasing your prices, why not say you're raising 250 or 300K, give yourself a longer runway, and give yourself a better marketing budget? If you have the financials behind the scenes, you don't need to put this into the pitch deck because there isn't time for it. But if you have the financials to back up when someone comes to you and says, why are you raising 300K? Well, because it's going to give me an 18-month runway and help me reach 10,000 people in a really quality manner or whatever, then you look really strong. So have an ask that makes sense, and have the workings out behind the scenes so that when the conversation starts with them, it makes sense. And because then they go, oh, okay, cool. And what all this does, this path of these three things, is it creates trust. It builds trust that you as the founder know what you are doing. As a lot of founders, unfortunately, they pitch before they're ready. And so they seem like they don't know what they're doing. But if you build trust, you're just gonna capture all this attention and all this energy, and you're really gonna stand out. And I know you only asked for 3, but there's one really quick final thing I want to add, which is something I say all the time in lots of contexts: make it useful. So I always tell my founders to make an end slide that says thank you or whatever. That's always at the end of most pitch decks. Say you're pitching to someone live. Why not have a really clear, easy to use call to action on there? My favorite is to use a QR code, right? On your final slide, thank you so much. Email address to contact me, QR code, learn more. And what if that QR code even took you to a unique page of the website that was made just for those investors with, whatever they needed to see to be able to invest in you? You look so incredibly prepared. You've built all this trust. And anytime anyone might have wanted to interact with you, you have made it useful. Some of these things are just about increasing your chances, but some of them are about people's perceptions of you. One thing one VC said to me was that their decisions are 10% science, or decisions in who to invest in are 10% science, 90% psychology. 90% is huge. So you want to make sure you are a foolproof person to invest in, not just a foolproof business. Obviously, both are important. But really being a trustworthy person is what it all comes down to. So I hope that helps answer your question.
It does. Thanks a lot, Seven. We're running out of time now, so I think we'll put a stop to the conversation. I've really enjoyed the conversation today, Seven. I've learned a note. I have a full page of notes. I'll send the summary out later sometime next week. But we'll now round up with our giveaways. So for our giveaways, we usually give out 2 £20 Amazon vouchers and $46 worth of snacks from Foodie Charged, allergy-friendly snacks. So we'll call on Rakia. Rakia would do the spinner, and she's got the names already. She will just spin it and tell us who the winners are. So Rakia, all to you.
Okay, hi everyone.
Hi. So let's spin away.
Okay. Congratulations, Jennifer.
Okay, so Jennifer, this is the Amazon voucher. We'll start with the Amazon vouchers. Jennifer, if you could just put your email address in the chat and I'll get in touch. Okay, we move to the second one, Rakia.
Congratulations, Georgina.
Georgina, I know you, so I have your email address. I'll be in touch. So thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.
Yeah. So the second £20 voucher is gone. So this is the third one is going to be the snacks. The snacks is usually should be for an American based person because the business we get it from doesn't send outside the state. So let's see how that works. Okay, right here. Let's see.
Dwayne.
Okay. Dwayne, are you?
Congratulations.
Okay, I'll be in touch. Hopefully, if not, we'll find a compensation, even if you're not in the States, that's fine. I think we can stop here.
Hey.
Yeah. Hi, Dwayne. Okay. So 7, we'll just call on you very quickly to just leave us with some closing remarks before we go.
Okay, cool. I pretty much put them in the chat, so there you go. Anyway, but no, I hope everyone found that useful. I think if I had to leave you with one kind of overall remark, it's that the journey of a founder is a long one. You strapped in for the long haul, but if it's something that you love, it's worth continuing. And there are, as lonely as it can sometimes feel, there are people out there who support with all kinds of things, I promise. So finding your entrepreneurial community can be a really big deal. If you want to connect with me, I do support founders in a number of different ways. Instagram is actually the best place for me if you're on Instagram, and if not, my LinkedIn has been shared several times, and that is also fairly easy to reach me on there. And yeah, please do so, because I've actually got a number of events coming up. For those of you based here in London, we're going to have an in-person pitching event that I've got coming up soon. So I'm just going to do a cheeky shout out to that. It's called Founders Live London, but also a number of other things coming up too. So please do connect, and you will get to see those when they get announced online and any other events. Instagram handle is basically my name at 7.jacobs. It's also in my Zoom window. So yeah, you can find me over there. Thank you so much, everyone, and thank you, Winifred, for having me. This was great.
Yeah, thank you, 7. We had the highest audience ever, 50, which is great. We hope that all of you will be back next month. As long as I have your email addresses, I would send you information about our next Fireside Chat guest. Well, thank you, everyone. Have a lovely day for those in the States, and for those
Thank you.
have a lovely evening. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Nice to meet you all.
Bye.